I snapped it. It felt weird. And then I was waiting for your big thud. You block until you hear the kick, and then you start covering. And I never heard the thud. And I just heard 96,000 people cheering. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. And then I turned around and I saw it gallery because you're running away from us. I could see the name on the back of your jersey. Okay, I must have launched it over his head.
Welcome to the Gallery at Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
Today, I'd like to highlight the Damani Gibson Foundation, focusing on raising awareness of heart health. It also provides leadership and empowerment service for youth and their families. The foundation works with student ambassadors to spark important conversations about emergency preparedness, all with the goal of educating athletes in the community about sudden cardiac arrest. We are honored to feature the Damani Gibson Foundation as they work to ensure athletes and bystanders are prepared to save lives where and when it matters most. To find out more information, find them at damanigibsonfoundation.org. That's DAMANIGIBSON foundation.org. Our next guest is Billy Reardon, former All-Big Ten Iowa center and long snapper. He took over the long snapping duties and earned a full ride scholarship before his first game of the 1994 season. He replaced an injured Casey Wigman in the 1995 Sun Bowl and became the starting center for the 1996 season. He helped direct the Hawkeyes offense to over 2,000 yards rushing, creating holes for the all-time leading rusher Cedric Shaw and Tavian Banks, and protected Matt Sherman to allow him to pass for over 2,000 yards. Please welcome Billy to the show.
My senior year I was at center. That was the only year I started after playing behind the great Casey Wigman. How many years did he play in the NFL?
15, I think. His first 3 or 4, he was bouncing around, but then got on Kansas City and played forever.
Then he started playing. That's probably a good thing early on. If you don't play much, you stay pretty healthy.
It's an old man's league, too. Sometimes the older guys are just consistent in that.
Hurls and I came in together fall of 92 as walk-ons. We had a great group of walk-ons. Nick, our redshirt year was your true freshman year, and you started punting right away as a freshman.
I did.
Were you all Big Ten that year as a true freshman?
Yes, got an all-conference award when I was a freshman. Sophomore year, I think I didn't have as good a year. Hurley and I switched off for the first 3 games, and I punted from then on.
There was a lot of movement on special teams. You guys had a little competition. Remember that? John Klein was your long snapper. I was the backup long snapper.
That's right, John Klein.
That's what I was trying to remember. Some of these things we're still trying to piece together. Like
sometimes they just pop in there. We're getting old.
Yeah. We're piecing it together slowly.
I remember the big losses as much as the big wins. We had some epic losses.
Brutal. Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know what word would describe those.
The wheels came off completely.
Felt like a dream. Is this really happening? Is that scoreboard correct? How did they have that many points? Not even halftime.
The 2 biggest ones I remember were our sophomore year. We went up to Penn State. That was when they won the national championship, went undefeated, annihilated us. Our junior year, the same thing happened again at Ohio State. So what was the score at the Ohio State game? What was that?
56-7. We scored in the last play of the first half.
We went in the locker room at halftime. One of the younger players said, "Come on, guys, we could still win." Coach Fry heard that. He said, "What game are you watching?" He's like, "This game is over." First time in my entire life that we ever been at halftime with coaches said, "Guys, this is over. Just make it look good."
That was bad.
The funny thing, I was really amped up for that game. I really was like locked in, ready to roll, and things went south.
Yeah. That game was so bad. Nick, I was long snapping in that game. I don't think I ever snapped one over your head in practice. We were lining up for a punt down like 35-0. I remember snapping, and it just came off weird. I had Mike Vrabel and Matt Finkus, the defensive end, in the A gap. I snapped it. It felt weird, and then I was waiting for your big thud. You block until you hear the kick, then you start covering. I never heard the thud, and I heard 96,000 people cheering. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. And I turned around and I saw it gallery because you're running away from us. I could see the name on the back of your jersey. Okay, I must have launched it over his head. But you still managed to get the punt off for a net. Even though I snapped it over your head, you still managed to get a positive punt. So thank you for that.
It went over my head and was like a couple foot deep in the end zone. I reached down and grabbed it one-handed. Vrabel almost got me in the end zone, but I dodged him. And then I started running. I did some weird slide kick that spun it 6 yards out of bounds.
The next time we had the punt, which was like a minute later, they probably scored, and then we went 3 and out. I'm up on the line, and Vrabel looks right at me, and he's like, nice snap last time. Okay, he's in my head. I think we got it pretty good from there on out. No more problems. I think that was it. I think that was the lone snap.
You're damn good.
One that got away. You and I were walk-ons with a lot of guys on that team. I do remember coming in, and remember Coach Austin? Very good to me. We were in freshman camp, and he said, hey, can you snap? And I just figured everybody could do it. I did in high school. I just said, yeah, let's do it. And then you're on the scout team freshman year. I backed up John Klein my redshirt freshman year. I remember Coach Fry talking to me and say, you talk about Jay Hilgenberg all the time. He said, we had him as a long snapper, and he turned out to be a pretty good center. Billy, remind me of him. If you're a starting long snapper, we'll give you a scholarship. The next year, I finally cracked the starting long snapper spot, even though I was still backing up Wiegman all those years. I got all my varsity letters as a long snapper because he didn't come out very much. It was one of those things you just never expected to do when you went into college. It got really hard in 96 because I was a starting center. You run a series, then Nick punts the ball 70 yards and flips the field. I had to sprint down there. I was toast for a while, secretly hoping the defense would be out there for a little bit so we can get some rest. But you guys were awesome. I talk about you, Hurls, all the time. It was a walk-on, what you did in that 95 Sun Bowl. You got player of the game.
Special teams.
Come in as a walk-on kicker, punter, to go to a bowl game your junior year and be the player of the game. I thought that was extraordinary. In the old facility, I would see your jersey up there with the Sun Bowl emblem. Is it still around there somewhere?
I don't know what they did at that when they moved to the new facility.
I feel like we were the forgotten generation. We're probably at Coach Fry's last good teams.
The teams after us, 97, 98, did worse. That was the best team.
The Cedric Shaws, Tavian Banks. Yeah, I know you and I were talking about said not being in the Hall of Fame. He's still a leading rusher of all time of Iowa football. How could that guy not be in the Hall of Fame? That's just insane. He was a competitor. And he did all that with Tavian Banks, splitting time with him over those years.
Those guys in the backfield. And yeah, he still had leading rusher. It wasn't like he was the only person back there.
Yeah.
So they were splitting, and it held off Tavian a little bit. He was so good. And Tavian was really good. So it was even more impressive.
Two different runners. Cedric would run you over. Tavian would run around you. Those guys had motors on them.
My favorite was Tavian would always be, I could beat him running 3/4 speed, so why would I run full speed? It's just like he was dead serious too. So he could.
Tavian would be running half speed and then kick into another gear, tearing down the sideline. Just doors off.
The thing was said too is you look at the rest of the, he has obviously the, all-time leading rusher stats, but he's also like the top 5 of everything. During that time frame, there was a lot of other really good running backs in the U.S. So he didn't necessarily get the national.
Yeah.
Troy Davis was up for the Heisman. And
Eddie George, I remember him setting the all-time college rushing title against us.
I try to black that out because I just remember the whole stadium chanting his name.
And then Keyjana Carter was that same era with Ced and Tavian as well. Big Ten was loaded with running backs. It was a different game, much different game.
That Penn State game, it was 35 zip after the end of the first quarter, and it was 45-7 at halftime. I remember that game, that cat thing that would
the cat, yeah,
it would just go row row, and it just went off all day long because they kept scoring. 61-21 was the final.
I have PTSD from that. That was crazy. But wasn't that sweet our senior year when we went in there and beat them?
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
It was 32 degrees and raining. It was like a freezing rain.
I did have a good
And,
feeling. This is the kind of game we could probably get in, pull
Yeah.
the victory and sneak out of here.
yeah,
Kind of muck it up a little bit.
that
And
was great. They had a good
Yeah.
team. There was great highlights.
Cedric didn't play. I forgot
Mhm.
until he said that. And I was like, oh, yeah, it was Tavian running the whole
Yeah,
time.
Dwight had that great punt return for a touchdown.
Oh, that was huge.
That was sick, yeah, for sure.
You still see that one come up. One thing about that season in 96, we were pretty good. We beat Arizona. We beat Iowa State to finish it off. We were 4-0 against Iowa State. We went down to Tulsa
Yep.
and lost. That was awful. We had a bye week, then played Nick Saban with Michigan State. Before we knew it, was still in the first quarter. We were down 17-0. Then something happened. Demo had a big catch. Sherman.
Third and long, 35-yard gain, and we erupted.
It changed everything.
That
It was the play of the year and flipped the whole season right there. By the fourth quarter, we came back. That was a good Nick Saban team. We had good wins after that. You remember the ESPN GameDay was a new thing. When we played Ohio State, we were both ranked, and ESPN GameDay came in. Driscoll says, hey, look, there's Fowler and Herbstreit over there. They're just sitting there watching the Hawk hitter. He was like, let's go talk to him. That was Driscoll. He was fearless. He went over there and started talking to those guys, ripping on Corso. We ended up talking to them for about 30 minutes. They're asking like what bars they should go to. That was pretty cool.
Can you explain what a Hawk hitter was?
Oh, yeah. Hawk hitters were a thing that Coach Fry would do on Fridays before home games. He would have all the scout team offense play a scrimmage against the scout team defense. These are guys who are generally redshirted and we're not going to be playing in the game. A lot of them were true freshmen. If you're on the scout team taking reps all week against the ones and twos, getting your head kicked in by guys like Mike Wells, you get a little more parity. You get to go live against guys that are young. That was always a good idea because the coaches watched those films and they graded them. You didn't see much of your position coach. Coach Verducci was our coach. My freshman year, you never really saw him except for a couple drills. Then you had to go down in the defensive field and play against the ones and twos. You didn't really see your coaches. That was a nice way to get some exposure. I don't think they do stuff like that anymore. I don't think they even hit during practice. I remember Tuesdays and Wednesdays it was rough. A lot of hitting going on with all the ones and twos. There was lots of fights, things happening. What did you guys do during practices? You could only punt and kick so much.
Yeah, Nick
What's
actually
that?
did stuff. Yeah, so he was.
Oh, Nick was a tight end.
We'd get into kicking games, try to punt over the bubble or put helmets 15 yards apart and try to throw a football at the helmet and hit it, or knock cups off the helmets, work on throwing the football to the ground, bouncing it back up like a basketball, spin it in your hand, stuff like that. You get so bored. I was thinking, why didn't I start trying to get into the coaching piece? Because you had so much time. I should have gotten a clipboard and done something. Hurley always laughs. You had so much energy. I played at a small school in high school, so I played every play. Then coming to college, I got lucky if I got in 4 times, and practice was
right.
15 minutes.
I remember you scoring a touchdown, Nick, as a tight end even. You're probably the first punter in Iowa history to score a touchdown when we were down to our 5th string quarterback, Jefferson Bates, Illinois.
I started off with Driscoll, and then he got hurt, and then who came in for him? Dupre. He got hurt early in the year.
Sherman was hurt. Okay.
Corby Smith came in and only got played a couple plays, and he got hurt. And Jefferson Bates came in, maybe finished out or got hurt too.
Maybe he couldn't even throw the ball more than 10 yards.
Did you hear the Sherman interview?
No.
Then that 94 season, he talks about how they got him back in the field. He was in a boot. He played that game, even though he traveled, wasn't expecting to play. They said, we have to put you in. It was at Purdue where we tied. He came in the second half, tied the game, said they had to inject him with a shot.
It was the only time he played at Purdue. That had to be one of the last ties in college football. Sherman ties it up. Purdue marches down the field. They had a field goal to win it, and they missed it. So we had a tie. That was the only tie I'd ever experienced. It's like kissing your sister. It felt more like a loss than a win. But then I don't think we ever got in any overtime games after that.
The worst thing about the tie kept us out of the bowl game picture. So we
did it?
5 wins and we needed 6. So we stayed home that year too.
5-1.
Sherman finished that year.
Sherman's another quarterback you don't hear people talking about. He has to be up there in the record books for yardage and wins. He won 8 games his sophomore year, 9 games his junior year. They were pretty good his senior year. They were highly ranked. that year, and they went to a bowl game.
I think he was 8th overall when I looked last. So going back to you starting your senior year, how much did you weigh at that point?
I don't think I was over 265 pounds. I was the smallest starting offensive lineman in the Big Ten our senior year. I had Mike Goff on one side, and then Derek Rose or Matt Reichel. It was always nice next to those guys. They could help out if I had a big 300-pounder over me. I remember my career at Iowa, it was tough because Coach Fry was bringing in a lot of offensive linemen, trying to find a replacement for Weigman. I was the walk-on little guy. And I got really lucky because those guys seemed to just fade away, and I still hung in there. And I remember my big break came in the Sun Bowl. Casey Weigman got hurt in the third quarter. I took over, and we had a nice drive all the way downfield, like 70 or 80-yard drive, and scored. We might have scored 2 times to put it away. I remember Coach Fry coming up and saying, Billy, I think you'll be our starting center next year. I remember that was a big moment. I was the number 1 guy after that bowl game. It was a special year. We went 9-3 our senior year. We had big wins. I remember we shut out Wisconsin in our last game in Kinnick Stadium, 30-0. We had a great offensive line, though. We had Verba, McKinney, and Goffer were all starting on that offensive line. They all had nice long pro careers. Nick, go back to your question. I was not a big guy. It was tough. That was my biggest problem. In high school, I was undersized. I had no college offers. I came to visit Iowa. I got lucky because I didn't know what I was going to do out of high school. I had no offers anywhere. Going to Iowa was the farthest thing from my mind. My brother was a student there, but I remember being upset that I didn't get more exposure or interest from Division I schools, because we had about 4 guys on our team that were Division I players. I had a really good high school team. My track coach in high school, he came up, he was a older guy. He played football at Notre Dame. He was a Marine, and he came up to me and he said, I heard from your mom, you weren't happy how things were looking. His name was Frank Amato. He said, get some film together, bring it to my office tomorrow, and let's watch it. See if we can find a place for you to go. We watched the film, and he said, about 10 years ago, I sent a guy named Mike Yaculo to Iowa as a walk-on. I think you could do the same thing. Hayden Fry will play his walk-ons. If you deserve to be out there. Coach Austin was a recruiting coordinator. Ducci was the old recruiting coordinator. He just got promoted to offensive line coach after Coach O'Hara died. I remember going out undersized, but I thought I could play. And I remember going out to visit during a spring practice. That's how late it was before we made our decision on where we were going to college. Coach Fry was leaving the practice, turns around and introduced himself. He said, we're pretty good to walk-ons here. He brought up like Brett Bielma's our team captain, Al Cross, who was an all Big Ten tight end. Al was a hell of a player. Paul Kuyava scoring a touchdown against Michigan. He said, Billy, we got 10 guys in the 2 deep right now that started as walk-ons. It was a 10-second conversation, it felt like, with Coach Fry. All right, I'm in. I'm coming.
So Coach Fry didn't show up to your house and sweet talk your parents? No?
I did listen to Sed's interview and all the visitors he had. I don't think Coach Fry knew who I was. We might have had one conversation a year when I was playing at Iowa.
That was the same with me. I don't think he knew I was on the team till first week.
He'd walk by you, he'd be like, I bet he doesn't know my name, but he did. He knew everybody's name. Remember, he used to fire some coaches on the sidelines. Did you guys ever hear him fire anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
He'd go up to coaches and get in an argument with them and say, you're fired. Like, he'd pull a Donald Trump on him. And I remember one time he fired me my senior year against Illinois. You guys remember those Illinois defenses, how good they were? They were unbelievable. But Coach Fry, depending on what hash the ball was on, he would put our offense in a formation and he could predict exactly where the Illinois defense would be. They always had like a 3 technique to this side. If I had a tight end to the short end, that was Illinois' defense. They were like, we're just going to line up. You guys are just going to have to beat us. There was one play where he called a draw to Tavian. The ball was on the left hash, so it was a draw to the right. We had 2 guys to block 4 guys. I hit Sherman, and I go, you got to audible out of this. We're going to get completely stuffed in the backfield. So audible's out of it. We still got stuffed for like a 4-yard loss. And we're running off the field. I remember this was 4th down. I'm running off right behind Sherman, and Coach Fry grabs him. He's like, why are you changing my play? And then Sherman turns around, he goes, Reardon did it. And Coach Fry goes, you're fired. Later, he's like, why'd you change that plan? I said, we had 4 guys and we only had 2 guys to block it. And he was saying, don't tell me what to do. He goes, that's Tavian Banks back there. Tavian Banks can run around 2 guys. So I was fired. And I remember I walked over to Coach Reducci. I'm like, he just fired me. What does that mean? He's like, now you're fine. Just go back out there. 2 series later, same formation, 3rd and long. He calls the same play. All right, let's see what happens. I think Tavian got stopped for 3 or 4 yards. I remember coming off the field, upset we didn't get a first down, but feel validated. He was a character. A lot of those one-liners and sayings, and what a guy to play for. It felt like he was a walking legend. Did you guys feel that whenever he was around and would tell his stories? I remember he never swore. I don't think we ever heard him swore. It was like playing for your grandpa. You didn't want to let him down.
Nick and I growing up in the state was something we followed him taking over the program and turning it into the program it is today. In my memories, it blends together and I can't always separate out. Was that something he said when I was on the team, or did I hear that on a press conference? He just always has been there, and it was surreal a little bit for me. Oh yeah, this is a guy I was watching on TV growing up.
My best memories were 2-a-days. We would have meetings at nighttime. He would have motivational speakers come in, but he was the best motivational speaker. He would talk for 20 minutes and then he'd just be like, oh, we got somebody in here to talk to you guys. And we're just like, Coach Fry was way better than that guy was. Coach Fry was always big on, guys, this is your team. You make the rules. At the end of each speech, he goes, does anybody need anything from me? Can I do anything for any of you? Willie raises his hand. Willie, what can I do for you? He goes, Coach, can we get some Fruity Pebbles and training table? Coach Fry looks over at Dirt.
The next day, they were there.
Next day,
we always had them.
They were Willie guy. I remember Coach Reducci. Hey guys, if Coach Fry ever asked that of any of you, don't ever take the bait at any of those.
His presence, he commanded that from us. He was that figure. He always unflinching, just that consummate leader. We were talking to Sherman and said, when it got to be 3rd and 8, he'd have Sherman call the play at 3rd and long. Nothing is good at 3rd and long, right? So it would get mad, and then he'd get mad at him, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah. Okay, you put the blame on them because they called a bad play at 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 10, and you're like, there's nothing that's going to work that way.
Just the things he did that I didn't know much about Iowa football growing up. I grew up on the north side of Chicago, not far from Evanston. Northwestern was right there. Nobody followed Northwestern football. Nobody followed Illinois football. Everything was Notre Dame. Fans didn't know that much about Iowa because they never really played Notre Dame. Everybody knew about the pink locker room. It was this like common knowledge amongst any grammar school kid around the country was him painting that visitor locker room pink. He would often talk about that in our meetings. The insane asylums, they put guys in straitjackets and they'd have to put them in those rooms. They'd paint them pink to calming, soothing effect on them. I don't know if that actually worked or not.
What worked best was when the teams would try to combat the pink locker room. Like he said in 1985, when Michigan came in, they covered the walls with posters. You guys are wasting your time worried about these walls. I've heard him got an advantage.
That was Schembechler he told that to, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played some other trick. Like he said, he had a snapper come out that was terrible. He had him in pregame warmups, and he wanted them to see like the snapper was bad, but that wasn't their snapper. He was always, I think, doing a little games like that just to kind of mess with the other coach, see if it could get in their head a little bit.
Yeah, I remember there were times Coach Patterson was the offensive coordinator, but there were times where Coach Fry would stop the game. He wouldn't even have a headset on. Just grab the playbook and start calling plays from the sideline, take over the whole offense. You could hear him talking, and he'd say, all right, I think these guys on the defensive end are going to do a stunt. One's going to go in, one's going to go around. I'm going to run Ryan Terry right between those two. He'd talk to himself, and he would call it, and that's what would happen. The guy was a savant when it came to running those offenses. I don't think we ever really changed the offenses over the years. Some of those teams eventually knew what the hell we were doing. But good teams, doesn't matter. It's, okay, this is where we're going to go, see if you could stop us, which is what we did. We had some pounding running game with Said and Tavian. And Mike Berger, he had a great couple of years. Then Granquist came in as a walk-on transfer from a JUCO. He ran the ball pretty hard.
Kent Call in 94.
Oh my God. Kent was a punishing running back from Colorado.
A huge shout out to Nate Kading and the incredible team at Hamburg Inn No. 2 for revitalizing a true Iowa City icon. This historic spot is back, serving up the comfort food and legendary pies and shakes we all know and love. Whether you're a local or just visiting, make sure to stop by and experience the magic yourself. Check out their story and menu at hamburginnno2.com.
As the center, you're the captain of the offensive line, right? What it was like for you to go up to the line, you'd make calls, and you were talking about those slants or the twists or whatever. Like, talk through that.
Every game I ever played in, I always felt very prepared. It's amazing now as a fan. I watch football. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't even know what the defenses are. I don't know what the offenses are trying to do. When you're in it and you've prepared for a week for a specific team, exactly what they're going to do, what defenses they're in, what offenses you're running. When we come to the line of scrimmage, you got to see what kind of defense they put in front of you. Is it going to be 4 down linemen, 4-3, 5-2? Is it going to be Eagle strong, depending on wherever he lines up? But you're pretty much ready. There's a blocking assignment you have to call out for all 5 offensive linemen so they know exactly who to block. It was a man blocking scheme. We never had zone blocking schemes. There were times when we figured out when there was a sweep, Cedric or Tavian would do like a 41 sweep. So there'd be a sweep to the right. We were usually pulling 1 or 2 linemen. I would make calls on which linemen were pulling based on what the defense was, or combination blocks to a linebacker. We had this, it's called big block. If we ever had a 3 technique or a 5 technique over the guard and tackle, you'd say big. That would mean you block those 2 big guys in front of you. We'd have calls like Ray and Luke. Luke was always like a left guard and center. We'd block up to the linebacker. Ray was right guard and center. We'd block up to a linebacker. Combo, we'd block back. There were all these different blocking schemes, running and passing, that we would practice so much over the week. When it came to game time, it really became second nature as to when you get up and you look at the defense. What I was telling you about the Illinois game when Tavian got stuffed in the backfield, you get a good feel of what your backs and tight ends are doing and who they're blocking. You could check out of a run play if you don't have enough blockers. So that's what you do as a center. You have to really understand what all the offensive linemen are doing and all your backs that are blocking and tight ends are doing. You also have to understand where these defensive men are. So you're like the quarterback of the offensive line. And you also try to take as much pressure off your quarterback as you can, because Shermy or Driscoll or those guys, they got enough to worry about when you got these freaks from Penn State and Ohio State breathing down their neck trying to hit somebody out in the open, especially when they had to do that 7-yard drop. Did Shermy talk about that?
Oh, yeah.
You did, yeah.
Have to listen to that.
I never really understood that. And the stand-up tight ends.
Lutzker talked about the stand-up tight ends because he went to the NFL and wasn't a stand-up tight end. So we talked about the difference. He said there's advantages and disadvantages. Hard to get leverage, but you could see the field and defense better.
Yeah.
On the 7-step drop, Sherman modified it, and they didn't like that, but it seemed to work okay. And he said that's what all the other quarterbacks had to do, and they never really understood why that was the technique they used, because it takes a long time to set up.
Our tackles always had problems forming a pocket. You couldn't really form a pocket with a drop that deep in the backfield. That caused the problems. I remember when Coach Fry died, they might have taken the stickers off the helmets. I remember he did that when Mark's mom died. And after the Gang Loose shooting in Iowa.
Yeah.
I can't remember when the NCAA made us take the A&F stickers off the helmet. The NCAA came out with a rule. Coach Fry was so upset about that because he came up with the A&F sticker. And we had the A&F sticker on one side and the American flag on the other. He told the NCAA that A&F sticker means America to us here in Iowa. If we have to take that sticker off, we're going to take the American flag sticker off too. And I think that year we removed the American flag sticker from our helmet as well, which is probably hard for him considering he was a Marine. I don't think we ever put it back on. Our time, it didn't go back on the helmet until Coach Ferentz took over. I don't know how they got it back.
They must have loosened up some rules. Now they got a bunch of stuff on helmets. Their country, where they're from, the state they're from,
right,
if they graduated or not. There's a lot of extra stuff.
The Hawkeye helmets for a while, they would have together on the back. My son played there for 4 years, and they were all able to choose what saying they wanted on the back of their helmet.
So that's a good segue. Why don't we talk about that process? How was that for you being a player, then having a son?
That was a lot of fun. My son, Liam, we call him Buddy, he had an interesting go at it. He was a long snapper in high school. He's pretty good. He started winning long snapping competitions because, everything is so specialized. Everybody goes to kicking camps. They actually have these long snapping camps. He won a couple of these things. I was lucky enough that I knew LeVar Woods because when we were seniors, LeVar was a freshman, and I was a special teams coach at Iowa. I shot him a video. I said, "Hey, are you guys looking for a long snapper?" LeVar brought him into a camp and said, "Let's do it." He brought him in as a long snapper during COVID. He was the number 2 long snapper as a freshman. Game week, the starting long snapper got COVID. So Buddy is some walk-on. He just shows up, and you're the starting long snapper. Game week comes, and they did another COVID test. So then the 5th-year senior was good to go. He was supposed to start his very first game at Iowa as a walk-on, and it didn't happen. But he was the backup long snapper that whole weird season. That guy was supposed to graduate, and he was going to be the starting long snapper the next year. His career was very much like mine. You just got to wait. You got to wait. They said that year didn't count. They brought back 6-year seniors. So then he's the backup long snapper again, and they bring somebody else in who moves ahead of him. So basically, he was there for 4 years and loved his experience at Iowa. He always said he would never trade it for anything. And I had a ball going to all the games. We all love the Hawkeyes. It's like a family for us. And it was just a lot of fun having your son be a part of that. He's become friends with a lot of us and our friends. I'm really proud of him because he wanted to go in the transfer portal when all this stuff was going on. He said, "I think I could probably just go start somewhere else." His mother and I talked him into staying. We said, "Get your degree first." And he did that. He graduated, and now he's the starting long snapper for Akron. He's having an amazing year. He scored a touchdown 3 weeks ago. They threw him a pass. He was a long snapper and got a PAT. So he's got 8 points this year. He's having a wonderful year. They gave him a full scholarship. He's getting his MBA. He loved his time at Iowa, even though he wasn't playing. As a parent, it's tough because you see your kid close to opportunities to play, and it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen for them. You got to keep them motivated. You got to keep them positive. They have to have a good attitude about it. And you can't talk to the coaches. My wife and I have 9 kids, and I don't think I've ever talked to one of their coaches about playing time. I always tell them, this is your thing. I'm not going to interfere with your relationship with your coach. If you want to start or play, you got to go to your coach, ask why you're not starting or what you can do to improve. I'm not going to do that for you. So that was tough as a parent, Nick, watching your kid for 4 years at Iowa. You don't want to get involved and just say, "Hey, how about this?" But you got to step back. That's what they're there for. They're turning them into men or young ladies. You just got to let them figure it out on their own and not interfere that way. But you got to have a positive influence on them. So it was bittersweet, but he said he wouldn't trade the experience for anything. I agree.
Was he a lefty like his dad?
No, he's a righty. It was a lot of fun because we were lucky. We played for Coach Fry. We were very spoiled at Iowa with just having such great coaches stay there as long as they do. You look at some of his buddies and they'll have coaching staffs switch halfway through their career. That would be tough. We never had to experience that. We always had the same coaches our whole tenure at Iowa, and that brought a lot of stability. But now with this transfer portal, all these kids are coming and going. You might have 30 different people from the bowl game to the kickoff of the next year.
You got a scholarship what year?
It would have been my 3rd year, a redshirt sophomore year.
Yeah, so after the 94 season, between that and thing.
I went through camp, and that was when I was the starting long snapper that year. That would have been John Klein graduated. I was the number 1 long snapper. Upset not getting a scholarship earlier after camp our freshman year because, you cracked into the 2 deep. You think you're ahead of a couple guys that had scholarships. Maybe I'm going to get one. Looking back at it now, I realized I wasn't the second string center. Hal Nady was the starting left tackle, but he was also the second string center. If we even would have gone down, there's no way they would have put me in anyway. It's funny when you get older and see these things. Looking back, I was upset not getting that scholarship, but now I see what they were thinking. I was happy Coach Verducci met with me after camp. I did not think I was going to get a scholarship. 2 days and school was about to start. He called me in and we sat down and he said, "It's been a good couple of years for you. We're happy to have you here and we're going to put you on scholarship." That was emotional. I called my dad, my mom about it. that was pretty cool because you don't realize how big of a journey it was going all the way from high school where you have nobody interested in you at all. And then walking on is not easy. Scholarship guys get the benefit of doubt more times than you are. Those position coaches gave those guys scholarships, and I think it's going to look bad on them if there's guys coming in as walk-ons and they're starting ahead of guys that they traveled and went in their living rooms. They traveled around the country. They invested a lot of time in. How is it that guy's not starting, but some kid shows up and nobody knows his name? He comes in, you start him ahead. But that was the beauty of Coach Fry. He didn't buy into that. He was going to put the best 11 on the field. I think that's why the walk-on thing is so big at Iowa.
I saw that growing up following the program that all these walk-ons were playing. So when I went to Iowa, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm going to get a good shot. He didn't tell me that specifically. I just knew from history that he'll play walk-ons. He's done that every year. Rob Houtland was a walk-on, probably the most famous kicker at Iowa. And so he's going to put people in there if they can play. That was not a concern of mine. Thanks for letting me have a chance. Hopefully I can compete and make it. You didn't make a mistake with me.
Yeah, there's something to be said about it. Coach Fry says Iowa football is the Dallas Cowboys of the state. That's probably why you could have a successful walk-on program. When Tom Osborne was coaching at Nebraska and winning national championships, he had walk-ons starting fullbacks, linemen. All these kids in Nebraska knew, or kids in Iowa, if I'm good enough, I'm going to start. I heard this year that every Division I football program, they're limiting the roster to 105. They're allowing colleges to give up to 105 scholarships. Some schools eliminate the whole walk-on program altogether. I don't think Iowa's going to do that. I heard a rumor they're going to do 95 scholarship guys and 10 walk-on.
That's not very many.
No.
I mean, how many did we probably came in with? 20 walk-ons.
Yeah.
At least. And then how many ended? 4 or 5 of us?
Yeah. You, me, John Ortley, Chambers, Granny.
The 4 of us from the very beginning. And then, Granquist added in.
Brett Chambers and Ortley had great stories. They came in as walk-ons. John came from Boca Raton. He had some offers. He thought they got taken away from him. He got a scholarship, I think, his 3rd year. Brett came out of nowhere. Johnny Hartley got hurt or missed a game, and the Chambers had to play against Michigan. I couldn't believe it. I remember watching him running in and off the field and making tackles. I was like, holy crap. I didn't know Chambers was starting at defensive end or outside linebacker. We had 5 guys left at the end of it. We started with about 20 of us.
But how many of us would have gotten left out if they only had 10 on the team? They might have had 2 or 3 per class. I wouldn't have been one of those for sure.
Yeah, they had the freshman camp for a week before the varsity would show up. Then all of a sudden, you got all this attention from all the coaches. They didn't talk to you for 4 months. Once the varsity guys came in.
We'd like to take a quick break and throw a shout out to our friend Derek Price and Club Faction and the Faction Foundation. They bring NFL caliber coaching to life's playing field. Their 4-pillar system, faith, family, fitness, and finance, transforms average performers into extraordinary leaders. They don't just coach, they elevate. Find them at thefactionfoundation.com.
Coming in with 0 publicity, improving your way through, what was your mindset? Do you think it was your family behind you? Like, how did you get to that belief of, hey, I can come in here and contribute? What was your mindset like at that point?
Yeah, Nick, you know what? It was a lot of things. I was alluding on this earlier. I played at a very successful high school. We had 1,600 boys. We were in the Chicago Catholic League. Very tough, smash mouth kind of football. This is a story that just popped into my head. That's funny. We were 12-0 my senior year. There were 6 conferences in Illinois. There's 8 now. We were called 6A, ranked number 1 in the state. After our season, we ended up losing the semifinals. I got a call from a friend of mine, 2 guys a year ahead of me I grew up with. They played for Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin. One of them called me up. It was Alex Illich. He said, I think Wisconsin's going to give you a scholarship. And I said, really? Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to come and play with you guys. Barry Alvarez up in Wisconsin. I think he's going to call you. I don't hear anything for Wisconsin. It was the offensive line coach was Bill Callahan. I talked to this guy, Steve Macetic, who I played with. He ended up signing with Notre Dame. We had a guy sign with Notre Dame, guy signed with Indiana. We had another guy going to Indiana, but a friend of mine, he chose basketball. He's now an assistant coach for the Bulls. I couldn't figure out what happened. I thought Wisconsin was interested. They're going to offer me a scholarship. What's going to happen here? Well, it turns out he thought I was Steve Macetic the guy who went to Notre Dame, Steve had mono for the whole year. So I was playing Steve's position. So Bill Callahan, he's now an offensive line coach in the NFL. He calls Steve Macetic up and he says, hey, we want to offer you a scholarship. He says, wait, what game did you watch? In the St. Rita game, we thought you were great, left tackle or left guard, whatever position it was. And he said, I didn't play that game. That was Bill Reardon. I never heard from him again. I found out it was because I was undersized. He said, there's no way you could play at Wisconsin. There's just no way. Small. When you watch the film, I had that confidence going in that I deserved to be there. I had that great coach Amato that I told you about. He called Iowa and got me set up as a walk-on at Iowa. I'd have long talks with him. He's like, I think you could start at Iowa. I think you could be a good player. Tons of support from family and your teammates too, like all you guys. We really were a family, really supporting each other. Those Hawk hitters, those build confidence a little bit. You're going up against scholarship guys, going live and hard, knocking guys around. You realize you could play. And then football is great because you don't have to be the biggest, strongest, and the fastest. But if you have an edge, an attitude, and a little chip on your shoulder, you could be a good football player. If you're smart, in the right place, the right time, use the right technique, and play with a little bit of a nastiness. It was a combination of support, experiences, watching other guys do things that you're just as good of as or better. It was not easy. Those days when you're getting up for the winter conditioning, we had to be at the bubble.
It felt like 2 in the morning. No one should be up, and no one was, literally. So
do you guys remember that one year, sophomore, junior year, where we started practice at 6? So everybody had to be in the bubble at 6 on like a Tuesday. It was like 10 below out. A couple of guys are late. All right, next practice, we're starting at 5:15. So next practice, if you're not here, we're starting at 5. Price lived near me and picked me up every morning for conditioning. We had to be there at 5:15, and I wake up and I look at my clock and it's 5:07, and I'm just like, holy shit. And I jumped out, took my roommate's car. I remember driving through downtown Iowa City at 5 in the morning, running red lights, running stop signs, just flying, take that turn into the complex, start going down the hill. There were guys at the bottom cheering, hurry up. I was the only guy who was not there. And it was like 5:14. I just ran into the bubble. I think I had my boots on. I didn't even have gym shoes on. I'm ready. Let's go. I did all the conditioning in my boots the whole time we were there.
I remember that.
I remember asking Price, why did you let me sleep in? He's like, I don't know. I was pounding on your door. I figured you already left. Those were some of the hardest times when it's 15 below out. You got to be at the facility in the morning. It's
20 below.
It's just awful.
That was a pure mental test. It wasn't really a physical part. It was, can you get up and do work at this time of day in this cold? Bubble was freezing cold. It was almost like outside.
The guys were barfing. Your body's completely out of whack. I remember it was nice when coaches went on their cruise. The conditioning coaches would go a little easier on us. They didn't get to go on the cruise, so they were upset.
They fed us creatine, right? Take a couple scoops of this crap at 5 a.m. that might make you throw up or not.
I wondered if that was a placebo. Given Iowa and their healthcare, they had some doctors and they go, this creatine doesn't work. I bet you it has a placebo effect. Let's give sugar pills and we'll call it creatine. Then we're done. But that's just me.
I thought the opposite. We're going to take this when we get to our 50s. Everybody's going to get these weird ailments that's like taking this stuff when we're in our 20s that we shouldn't have.
Right.
That has this, and that's really bad for you.
You can't move your neck. Oh my God, my neck. I just turned 50. How about you guys? Any long-term injuries?
No, I was lucky. I had some back problems, like just kicking in the bubble a lot. That was a lot of pounding on your plant foot over and over again. But once I stopped playing football, it went away. It was just wear and tear. I didn't have any injuries.
I had like a 3rd-degree sprain on my ankle when the 4 seconds that they let me play tight end. So that once in a while gets a little stiff. And then I blew up my Achilles after school, goofing around playing flag football once. Otherwise, feel pretty good, yes.
Yeah. Nick, I forgot how tall you were when I saw you again. I was looking up at you when you came into that Michigan game. Yeah. I remember.
6'3" 3/4.
Yeah, you look like a tight end. Is that what the pros put you at on that pro day? When they measured you? 6'3" 3/4?
Yes, exactly. So when people are like, how tall are you? I was like 6'4", but like 6'3" 3/4.
Yeah, 6'3" 3/4. Yeah. Well, they humble you at those things. They weigh you in.
You're the lightest, shortest, and the slowest
right.
ever going to be in your life.
I remember at one of those pro days, Mike Devlin, All-American center at Iowa, had a nice pro career. I think he's coaching in the pros now. I remember when on the program he was 6'3", like 280, 290. There's no way you're 6'3". On that pro day, he was like 6 foot and an eighth of an inch. It was not 6'3".
Yeah, right.
Like he was like 3 inches off.
Casey wasn't that big either.
He was like always 6'2" in the program, and he probably was 6'1". But yeah, he had a hell of a career. He wasn't even drafted.
I think he was afraid.
Yeah. I remember I saw Wiggs right after we got done playing. You guys signed when we were done, and I was goofing around with the long snapping thing, see maybe I could jump on with somebody. And I hired this agent, Jerry Venisi, who was the old GM of the Bears. And it didn't work out. A year later, he calls me up. He's like, I think I got a workout for you with the Bears. They need a long snapper. I was living on the East Coast, and he's like, are you still in shape? I'm like, yeah, tell him I'm in great shape. So I jumped on a plane. I fly back to Chicago. I go out to Hallis Hall. I haven't played football in a year. They're like, all right, we're going to work you out in the practice facility. Go warm up in the gym. I walk in there. Mike Wells, Casey Wiegman's in there. They're like, what the hell are you doing here? I'm like, oh, trying me out for long snapper. Actually, you have a pretty good day. I met with Mark Spielman, Chris Spielman's brother, the director of pro personnel for the Bears. Dave Wanstedt was the head coach. And he's like, got to be honest with you, Jerry was talking, and I didn't know who you were. He goes, there's certainly a talent there. You got some size on you. Wigman's talking about you. He says you're pretty good. Maybe contribute to the team. I was like, holy crap, this might actually happen. He's like, if we don't draft a long snapper, we'll probably bring you into camp with us. I couldn't believe it. They ended up drafting Pat Manley, who started the next 18 years for the Bears, and they have awards named after him.
The odds they are going to draft a long snapper, right?
I'm like, oh, I was that close. I live on the south side of Chicago, and all my kids caddy. And there's a really nice country club nearby, Beverly Country Club. Pat Manley's a member there. And my son, Buddy, who's the long snapper, caddies for him. So they know each other. I'm like, did you tell him how he ruined my life?
That's right.
We could have been living in Lake Forest for 18 years. Instead of the south side of Chicago.
If you're not in a certain strata in the NFL, it is like that.
Yeah.
Like I would go to these teams, you would see these guys, and I'd look and say, okay, that guy, I know guys that are better than him, more talented, more athletic. Just that piece of getting in, doing well at the right time, the fit.
I did not realize that you had that long of a career after Iowa. The number of teams that you had signed with is unbelievable. You were still on rosters 5 years out. Was it 4 to 5 years after you finished at Iowa? You were in NFL Europe, then you were jumping on with an NFL team here or there. It was Kansas City, your last one?
Yeah, I basically was like, I don't want to try to do this for a long time. Of course, I tried to do it for a long time. But I signed, it was 4 or 5 years out. I Kansas City twice. I went to the Jets practice squad, played a game with the Jets, got cut the next Tuesday, was on the Eagles practice squad, went to the Dolphins, went over to Europe, was in the XFL.
Yeah.
XFL was the last stop. I was Mr. Irrelevant for the first XFL draft.
Oh, were you?
Yeah. They were like, we want you to be a tight end too. And oh, that's amazing. Sure, I'd love to. And they're like, blocking tight end. I haven't blocked in 6 years.
Right.
I lifted weights to do that in 6 years. At least. So.
I don't want to call it luck, but there is so much luck to it. If you could just be the guy at the right spot at the right time. Obviously, you got to be prepared. You have to be talented. Sometimes you just fit into a system or something like that could work out. Honestly, us going to Iowa, I'd be amazed if I ended up, let's say, I went to Wisconsin as a walk-on or I went to Illinois. I probably would have lasted a year or two and given up. Just say it's never going to happen. This is not the right fit or system. But you're right. You never know when the chemistry is going to be there, when you're going to fit in there. A lot of times it's relationships too. Coaches like a certain attitude some players have. But the game's certainly changed. It's not as violent as it used to be, certainly. these guys have more longevity too. So it's probably harder to crack into the NFL now than it's ever been.
You have more of a level playing field. The training and some of those things have gotten so specific in that part. It's interesting you say that you would have gone to somewhere else for a little while and been done. I think these are sort of an exit interview in a weird sort of way, right? Talk to people after they've come out of the program. You look at how would you build a program? There's this web of people around these players that just keep pushing them back in.
Right.
You get to a certain point where you're down, the coach is on you, your girlfriend breaks up with you, whatever it is in life, people are still that support system. It's from the smallest and strangest places, but it keeps them in there. It keeps them pushing forward in the right direction at those times. You just don't see it far enough ahead. Someone else is just keep coming, keep working, and you're going to get there. That's part of what's going to help you have longevity, learning how to get through adversity, injuries, and competition and all that stuff. And I think now, are the kids going to get that? You run into a rough patch, pull a ripcord and go somewhere else. You're not getting those pieces that
Right.
you need to do that. And not to sound like I'm a 50-year-old man, but I think it's a viable thing. At Iowa, I had a great first year. Second year, I just didn't do as well. And you are like, what happened? What do I have to do differently? How do I prepare going through the ups and downs?
When your confidence is shaken or you have an injury, that's an aspect nobody talks about. You think everybody's doing fine upstairs and physically all the time. And you're right. People probably pull that ripcord too soon. Look at Ryan Driscoll. He could have gone anywhere. And in his fifth year, he was the backup quarterback because he was an incredibly loyal guy. I just don't think you really have that loyalty anymore. Time will tell whether this is good for college football or not. Probably not. We've been talking for an hour and a half and we haven't really talked about academics at all. The reason why you're supposed to be doing all this, you got to admit, even in our era, it was football first, social life second, and school third. School's supposed to be first thing. And I think with all this transfer stuff, it just even makes that even farther down. These guys are not getting degrees. They're not taking advantage of academic opportunities. It's just a minor league for the NFL now. The money's crazy. You hear about these five-star kids supposed to go to Ohio State. No, I'm going to go to Miami. They give them all this NIL money. So we'll see what happens.
Do you have an insight on the NIL piece too, right? With your son?
I only know how it works at Iowa. My understanding is all the players on the team get a piece of the NIL. There's this NIL collective that everybody donates into, and then it's out of that collective that they pay the players. All players, including walk-ons, get a minimum of $10,000 for the year. They have to do various things to get that. It might be $6,000, but I believe it's $10,000. That's if you are a freshman or if you're a walk-on. If you're like a sophomore scholarship player, my understanding is you get $20,000. If you're a junior, you'd get $30,000. Senior, you get $40,000. It could have gone up. I know that's how it was like a year or two ago. Is how that they would distribute that collective. Guys who are in more specialized, your quarterbacks, your running backs, your household names, those guys can go out and they can market themselves any way they want. In addition to just not being on the Iowa football team. So like Torrey Taylor, I remember he's a punter for the Bears now. He had those shirts, punting is winning. He had his own thing going on with, I believe, with those on top of whatever the collective would give him.
He couldn't use the collective for some reason. I feel like there's something about him being Australian that kept him out.
He probably had to get a green card to be in the United
something
States.
like that.
That's how it worked in the last year. Nobody really knows what this is yet. I think they're still trying to figure it out. Nobody really knows what the portal is. The portal is a goofy thing. You have to let your head coach know, and they release you. You submit your information to the portal, and you're just floating out there in cyberspace, hoping somebody grabs you. I know some guys were using the portal as leverage to get scholarships at Iowa a couple of years ago. If you guys remember this, when guys would always say, hey, if I don't get a scholarship, I have to leave. And they wouldn't give them the scholarship, the guy wouldn't leave. If they go in the portal, you've completely detached from that team. You guys use it as leverage to get scholarships, but if they don't give you a scholarship and you're off the team, you're done. So you really can't bluff it like you used to. There was a kicker a couple of years ago, a short guy. His dad was a kicker at Shudak was not on scholarship, and he went in the portal, and then they gave him a scholarship and pulled him back. Different things work for different people. It's all fluid. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. Now they're saying that they're going to pay the players who were on rosters back since 2016. That compounds over the years.
With interest.
The juice was rolling.
Yeah.
That video game that they had number 46 on?
And what was that? There was
Was that Madden?
NCAA college football.
That's how cool we are. When NCAA football first came out, we get the game and see our numbers out there.
It was someone that looked like us with our same statistics, same number, but not us.
They wouldn't even say the team name. They would say the University of Iowa was just like Iowa City, or Notre Dame was South Bend. They had all the right numbers of all the starters.
Except Derek Price said his complexion was a little off in the game.
Is Price still doing that Navy SEAL training? Did he talk about that at all when you had him on?
A little bit of that program.
A couple of years ago, I had a friend here on the south side of Chicago. He's just one of these CrossFit guys. He likes to do all these physical challenges. One day, he's like, I'm going out to California. I'm going to do this Navy SEAL Hell Week to test myself to see if I could do it. I could never do something like that. And then he comes back. He's like, I ran into a guy that knows you, Derek Price or something. I'm like, what? And he told me that he was one of his instructors when he was going through like this Navy SEAL Hell Week training. Price was a freak of nature, big, fast, strong.
Yeah, if you haven't heard his interview, you should put that one on next. He's got all kinds of stories.
He backed up Slutzker, right? And he still made an NFL roster. He had a big play in a pregame. He had a big touchdown.
He had a wild first year of the NFL. It's pretty good.
Yeah. He's got a company called Faction. I think he was doing Navy SEAL type training workouts, tests, and a coaching portion. A lot of ex-military types. So serious kind of life coach with a little physicality in that built in.
I remember he took us out to your farm one time for dinner. We had a big group of us went out there. Met your mom and dad. Robert was like in 6th grade, but he was like 6'8".
Like this skinny.
That skinny.
Like his head was like this big.
Real quiet.
Yeah.
I couldn't get 2 words out of him.
Probably had a bowl cut at that point. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you come out once or twice? Somebody said that one time you made him work, which I don't remember.
No, I don't think you put us to work.
Yeah, I think there was 2 trips. One was like some kind of hunting and working on the farm. The other was just hanging out, eating food, barbecue.
I would have remembered if you put me to work. So
I didn't get put to work. So.
You farmers did such great work ethic. There were different types of strength, farm strength. Chris Webb was pound for pound the strongest I've ever seen. When he'd walk in there, he'd be like 260 pounds, but he could squat like 800. He had that farm strength about him.
He would go back on the weekends after the games. I'd go work the farm and come back on Mondays. We would run into each other on the interstate, coming back to campus like a Sunday night. And I was like, oh, wow, I actually have to go back and work after a game.
Football was hard enough, and these guys went back and they worked the farm. He would show up at that house with like half of a cow or a pig or something, and just you'd walk in the kitchen, there'd be like a half a pig on the dining room table, not refrigerated, side of beef sitting there, and they're like, we'll get to it. They're gonna cut it up.
I remember one of the days when we had a scrimmage. He was a good player, really strong. Somebody pissed him off. He punched somebody with the helmet on. He thought the guy was going to get knocked out. He hit him like he hit him hard enough where you were wild. That really landed like a super solid punch on him. Yeah, just like recoiled the person. With, that was a 300-pound human. Just like bam. Okay, we'll all just back away.
I think we were in game week. Webb was our best defensive lineman, and he was walk on. Something happened with eligibility where he had to leave school. That was when they put Jared DeVries in, and Jared DeVries did what Jared DeVries did, tore it up. That was a shame when Chris was ready to start that year. He was in such great shape, one of our best guys. For whatever reason, he was ineligible.
I forgot about that part where he just disappeared at the end of the season.
And nobody really ever heard. I think he went back to the farm. He still farms. I ran into him a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, at one of these reunions. And what are you doing? Farming. He's got kids. Same Chris.
Talk a bit about offensive and defensive linemen.
I'm starting to get fat now that I'm 50. I'm starting to put some weight on. One funny thing I've always noticed about The old linemen, they tend to slim down. They get huge, up to 300 pounds. When they're done playing, they'll drop 80 pounds. But the D linemen, they always look like they could still play. It's a different mentality, I think, to be an offensive line than a defensive lineman. I think offensive linemen are definitely more cerebral. They like to know what the plan is. I have a plan, where D linemen just want to eat people. This is my gap. I want the football, kind of a thing. That's always been my kind of take on it. Like the O lineman, I thought always had a higher IQ when it comes to like book smart. D linemen were more instinctive type players and a little cruder. I still hang out with Eddie Sadat, John Ortlieb, and Pat Peterson. He played 10 years ahead of us. All those guys are D linemen, and they try to make me feel lucky. They're allowing me in their group as an O lineman. I'm like the only O lineman. They're a bit rougher around the edges. A couple years ago, I was at an Iowa game and went to Iowa City by myself. I had no plans. I had no kids with me. I always had kids with me. I got to meet all these old Hawks. They were the 1981 Rose Bowl team being honored. It was like 40 years. So I met like Mark Bortz, who played D-line at Iowa, but then he was an offensive lineman for the Bears and won the Super Bowl. He's the only guy that I ever heard of or met that was like a D lineman in college and then an incredible offensive lineman in the pros. Talking to him, the guy's totally D-line. Just the way he carries himself, the way he talks. And then those guys were wild. I met a defensive lineman named Pat Dean. He said he dated Kamala Harris from California in the 80s when he got done with college.
Whoa. That's wild.
So we're standing around. He's like, hey, anybody at this table ever date the vice president of the United States? Raise their hand. And then he puts his hand up.
That's wild.
Yeah, those guys were wild.
The one time you didn't have any kids, it's like with that many kids, you just like probably happened to leave them in the car. You're like, oh, what are you doing back there?
Oh, man, I always got kids with me everywhere. Do you remember where I saw you when you were out there for Robert's induction in the Hall of Fame? There's that new Marriott next to the stadium. My son Buddy had a house in the alley next to that. We would just jump in the car and go to a game. We automatically had a place to crash. We didn't have to go to the Marriott and drop $1,000 over 3 nights just to stay somewhere. I'd always bring the boys with me. I still have another boy who's a freshman in high school. He's playing up in the varsity for the playoffs. He just made him the starting long snapper. He's a D lineman, an offensive lineman. But being the long snapper, it gets you playing time.
Is he really a D lineman or is he
going to be an O lineman?
I think he's
okay. He plays both ways on the line. I have 2 other boys. I had 4 boys playing football this fall. I have a 6th grader and a 4th grader. I was coaching those guys in grammar school. I still do that. You guys coach at all?
I did a little over the years, just one-off kids here and there, helping with kicking and stuff. If someone found out about my background and had a connection to me, I worked with a few kids.
Yeah. Coaching is difficult. I'm always amazed at how hard it is. Motivating kids, dealing with parents, and then all these other sports. I'd be coaching all these kids and they'd be like the best kid on your team. They'd be like, I'm not going to be at practice. I got hockey practice. It's September. Hockey season starts in January, but these kids are all playing so many sports. It's tough to field the roster for youth football these days.
Yeah, I've debated doing some coaching, but I haven't gotten into it. I probably should have gone that route. I don't think I could have gotten over trying to have a family and just not seeing them. We saw Hendrickson's kids as much as he did. And
yeah.
The wives were those special women ran the family for him, basically, because they were just never home, it felt like.
Mm-hmm. It's not easy to get into. I remember when I was done playing, Coach Verducci asked if I'd be interested in being a GA at Iowa. I said no. I always go back to that. It's one of those what ifs. What if I would have just taken that opportunity? I'm just a weird guy because I got an engineering degree at Iowa. I worked really hard to get that, even though my GPA, you wouldn't know that. I was done with football. I'm done. I'm going to start my career. I'm going to go back to Chicago, get in with a firm somewhere. I was just in a big hurry to grow up. I always look back on that and wonder, what if I would have just taken him up on it? Been a GA for Coach Fry for his last 2 years.
How did you get into law?
Well, I've been a lawyer for 20 years. 18 as a criminal prosecutor in Chicago. Now I work as an employment lawyer for a small utility here in Chicago. We treat all the waste and stormwater for Cook County, which surrounds Chicago. I moved out to the East Coast. I showed up on a job site. I didn't even know how the world works. You know, you just don't know anything. You've just been playing football for 5 years and going to school. And I had just various odd jobs, pouring concrete, working at the medical school, filing things. Just had no idea how anything worked. I walk onto this commercial job site. It was a $90 million data center for the IRS. And they're like, okay, you're the electrical engineer on the job. And I hit the guy next to me, like, do they know I'm a mechanical engineer? I don't even know what that is. But yeah, you're the electrical engineer. I was managing electrical trades and I knew nothing about electricity, electricians, or how buildings worked. You just got to go out there and figure it out. You got to go out there. You got to talk to guys. You got to learn how things happen. So then I bounced around that company for 5 years. I became a project manager. You guys been in Chicago? You've been in Millennium Park with the big bean and the band shell. So I worked for 2 years on that project. I walked in and the columns underneath the Frank Gehry band shell next to the bean, they never really engineered the garage underneath to hold all that weight. So the columns start buckling underneath it. I go on that job for my first day. They're like, this is Bill. He's our structural engineer. He's going to fix all the columns. Okay, now I'm a structural engineer.
Oh, no.
I guess I better figure out how all this stuff works. It was a great experience. Right out of college, working for 5 years. Nothing is set out. You have to figure it out on your own. That's kind of what football teaches you. And being a Hawk is you're going to have challenges. People are going to have expectations of you. Care, show up, take interest, and figure it out. I got burnt out in the construction business. Always running up on deadlines. Things were always happening that was not necessarily my fault, but that's what leadership is all about. And I just always had an attraction to get into the law. My sister was a lawyer. Other family members were lawyers. I thought it was something I could be good at. So I started going to school at night. Danielle and I were married. We had a buddy. He was just born. I went to school at night for law school. Eventually, we had a third kid, and I quit my job at Walsh. I was a stay-at-home dad for 2 years so I could finish law school. After that, I rolled right into the state attorney's office here in Cook County. The best job I ever. I miss it. I did that for 18 years as a criminal prosecutor. It's been a wild ride. Just trying to balance your relationships with your spouse, all these kids, and then trying to have a career and having fun too. So I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I'm still trying to figure it out. That was another thing in my high school. We had a lot of D1 caliber guys, but they were super smart. So they all went to Ivy League schools, the Yales, Princeton, a couple of Harvard. Did your high school send any kids to Ivy League schools? Or,
You're talking about for athletics too?
Yeah, out of high school.
Not many for athletics, few for academics.
Yeah, that's big in Chicago. So many kids are smart. Playing sports. They're like, well, where's Gabby going? Oh, she's going to Dartmouth, play basketball. All these kids, they have these football players go to the Ivy League. Everybody's trying to get their kids into the Ivy League schools. Athletics is a way to do it.
Do you guys remember Bruce Wall? Was a walk-on receiver at Iowa?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Maybe a couple years older than I was. He was probably like one of the first people in our conference to be at a D1 program. He was a walk-on. He was a receiver. He was fast, really good athlete. I was the first person, I think, in our conference to get a scholarship to D1. It was just never happened. And so, yeah, my brother and I are weird anomalies that happen that way. We're a smaller school, so I don't know if somebody back then went to an Ivy League school. That was really rare.
Brian, you went to City High, and it's right.
Yep.
You guys were producing Hawkeye football players like crazy. Every year there were 2 or 3 guys full ride going to Iowa. I was looking at my high school, 1,600 all boys. My year we had a lot, but it wasn't always like that. There were 10-year windows where not one guy got a Division I scholarship. I was amazed at how smaller Iowa schools can produce great athletes. Where was it? Parkersburg? You got Wigman, Jared, DeVries, Aaron Campman. This tiny little area on the map in the middle of Iowa is just producing all these pro football players. It's a total anomaly. Coming from a big metropolitan place like Chicago, it's even more amazing for a guy like me when you see stuff like that happen.
Yeah, it's wild. You get exposure to playing a lot, right? Because you don't have to
Right.
The competition. You're in a position where there's only 20 kids out and you play all the time. You have to be resilient too. I think about it myself. I did a lot of things that didn't really happen at our school, so I don't know how I even thought that I could do them, to be honest. I don't know if I was just like oblivious to it. I went to the Drake Relays in high school. We had 3 kids out. I was the only kid out, and I was, you were my buddies. You're coming out with me. I was oblivious and didn't know any better. I'll just see where this goes. Like, it's really strange to think in those terms. This was a new world for me. I don't know.
Right.
I'm sure I sound like a country bumpkin.
No, it makes a lot of sense. That's why youth is such an amazing thing. Don't know you're not supposed to be doing something. You do incredible things that you have no business doing. Looking through my experience, I don't know if I would ever recommend anybody doing that, ever walking on at a Division I program. I got one kid who's doing it. I always walked away from that being, I don't know if I could do that again. That was really hard. It was a great experience, but it was not easy, and happy it worked out. It was a lot more likely that it wouldn't work out. Like you guys, the competitions that you guys got into, the punting probably made you guys that much better. It's crazy how adversity, when you compete at that level, you just prove a lot of things to yourself. You get better, you get stronger.
The walk-on thing was interesting. On top of the fact that you're now getting in there competitively, they're also saying, but is this person really going to be able to do the job? They're bringing in new guys to say, let's scholarship someone else because maybe they're not going to be able to do it. I know you got that same thing. Better bring in a scholarship guy. You still beat out those guys. You're not only competing with the guys that are there, they're also bringing in new talent and expecting them to replace you. You just got to stay focused and do your thing every day. A lot of them just don't pan out, right?
There were a couple guys they brought in. There were JUCO transfers or high school. Oh, this guy was an All-American. He could have gone anywhere. We're going to bring him, and he's starting ahead of you. You can see the writing on the wall. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to give up, let somebody push you out? Or are you going to stay in there, fight, and show everybody you deserve to be there? Hurls, I'm looking at you. You came in there, and we went to that very first Alamo Bowl. Nick, you're the starting punter. Hurls, you're the starting. And I think, what did we lose, 38-3 against California?
Yeah, 37-3.
The inaugural Alamo Bowl. But that 3 was you hitting like a 50-something yard field.
A 42.
You were non-scholarship at that time, right? Walk on.
I got my scholarship after that game. That was the first game I started as a kicker. So I started with a punter that did kickoffs later in the year and then field goals. They thought he's going to be competing somehow, whether he makes it or not.
Were you the pooch punter too?
I think the last year or two.
Then Zach Brommer would hit the shorter ones. What a weird dynamic. We had 2 punters and 2 field goal kickers. They could all play in the same game.
It worked out really well.
Todd Romano was good. I remember Todd coming in.
Him and I battled back and forth a lot.
Yeah.
He'd take over and then screw up and I'd take over.
Nick, were you competing against Romano? He was a punter also.
Yep.
I think a little bit in the beginning, and Sherman came in. Sherman did well in high school. He says his dad's buddies padded his stats. He was super humble. We left that interview. I said, how did I let that go by? He just like Coach Fried us. He was just lucky to be there. I was like, well, you led the state in passing. What are you talking about? 2 years in a row. Like you were torching people. What are you talking about? You had a great career. So it's funny to get lulled into that.
And Nick, I always thought you were more recruited as a tight end than as a punter. Then you were just like, hey, we're going to try Nick out at punting. I had no idea that you were also recruited as a punter. And watching you bomb 70 yarders, I'm like, wow, look at this guy. He's a tight end and he's pounding the ball.
To be honest, I was just the token Iowa kid. Somebody had to turn down the scholarship at the last second for me to get it. I was wavering on going to UNI probably or coming to walk on at Iowa. A hard choice. I really was leaning towards Iowa. I came in as a linebacker. I think probably because the game they came to watch me, I dropped 3 passes, like just had a rough night and bounced like 3 off my hands.
Right.
So I think they started out as linebacker. Once I got there and was punting, people could see I had a stronger leg, and I think they'd struggled with the guys before me. They were like, "Oh, you just punt, and that's it."
Yeah.
I happened to fit in that peg, right spot at the right time, and hit a nice one early.
I always liked the special teams coaches, Coach Triplett and Coach Hendrickson. They weren't really specialists themselves, so they weren't really teaching you how to punt or kick field goals, were they? or is it just trying to get you guys in the right mental state to be successful? How did that work?
Coach Triplett was managing us. He pretty much stayed out of the way, making sure we're doing stuff. I think we were pretty good. Earlier years, they had to keep them in line. We came in pretty focused. We weren't screwing around. Then Coach Hendrickson had been at Georgia Tech and he had an All-American kicker. He had some knowledge around kicking and he would interject a few times. For the most part, they weren't kicking coaches. That's a newer thing where you have people who can come in and help them. So you're on your own. And I think Nick, I don't know how much coaching you got. Coach Fry would throw in a comment once a year. Tilt the ball a bit to the left. I think they left us alone. I don't know. Nick, did you get any formal coaching
Not
at
really.
Iowa?
I vaguely remember Coach Fry saying, just leave him alone. No one talk to him. They thought people were going to mess me up. It was interesting. My freshman year, I took Taekwondo. It really helped me like leg strength wise and flexibility and all those things. But Coach Triplett was concerned that I was going to get hurt. I thought that I should be taking more of it. It was super helpful. It helped me kick better. I don't think they had the background to be a positive piece that way. I think Coach Fry, one time I did a 3-step instead of a 2-step, and he told me he was going to give me a bus ticket home. But other than that, he pretty much stayed out of.
What you were trying to do was more of an NFL style of punting. Is that what you were trying to do? The 2-step instead of the 3-step?
This was a fatal flaw for me. I saw a bunch of guys in the NFL doing 3-steps. Once I got done with school, they were basically, when I got to Iowa, like, you're going to be a 2-step.
They taught 2-step because they had a heck of a time years prior getting punts blocked. A lot of other schools kind of did traditional 3-steps. We got told you're going to do 2-steps. Better learn how to.
That's pretty accurate. I got done with school. I tried to switch at that point. It made me inconsistent because I was trying to rush. You almost got to be like moving in that first step as you're catching it to follow through. And I would rush it and I'd spray it out of bounds. Probably a fatal flaw of mine to do that, which at being 20 some years old on your own doing it, no one's like, hey man, that's probably not a great idea to change what you got you here.
I mean, you flipped so many fields in college. It was a huge advantage doing it as you did. And then Hurls, what just popped into my head was you did the kickoffs too, right?
Yeah, at least the last couple of years I did. Me and Todd would rotate sometimes.
Do you remember Michigan State when we were down 17-0? Was that the game you were kicking it into the sun and the guys couldn't see the ball?
Yeah, we did pooch kickoffs. We would try to hit it around the 10 or so in the corner, converge the coverage down there. The sun was in their eyes.
Was something you noticed during the game?
I think that was planned, but it worked way better than we were expecting. I think they bobbled a couple and then we got in the ball. They started like at the 10 or inside the 10 a couple possessions in a row. So it turned out well. It was just luck that they struggled. It happened to land in the sun at the right time.
Was that because we were getting returns back on us, or why did they do that?
Our return guy was good, Derek Mason, I think. And so we were trying to figure out a way to throw off their return. I wanted to ask about the long snapping because you don't ever want to know who the long snapper is.
Right.
Other than that one game, you're pretty much dead on all your snaps. That helped us be successful. No one knows who you are, really.
Right.
That's a strange dynamic to be a specialist where we're out there exposed and everyone sees us. You are hidden in that whole thing. Same with the holder, right? You don't know who the holder is, Driscoll or Matt Ide or Jefferson Bates. If they mess up, then everyone knows who they are. Well, how was it like being in that role, going from center to snapper?
Looking back, I kind of fit my personality. There is nobody more under the radar than I am. I still live my life like that. Professionally, that's how I operate. I don't like to be out in the front. I like to be the guy behind the scenes doing the work. It's weird because I don't think I'm introverted, but maybe when I work, I am. I don't know. The long snapping thing was interesting. I started in high school. I remember one of my coaches saying, hey, if you really get good at this, you can get a full ride. You can play at a major college program and do it. I never really thought about it until Coach Austin asked me. You practice every day. You start working on it. Things start coming together. It's a specialty like you guys. It's not as technical as what you guys do. All quarterbacks can do it. Anybody who could throw a pretty good football can actually long snap.
That was one of the things we would do on the sidelines. to kill
Yeah,
time. We would
you
practice
guys were all, I
snapping.
remember you guys were all good long
We weren't
snappers.
too bad, yeah. I think we could do
Yeah.
it if we had to.
Absolutely. That was always a big goal, to be under the radar. As a long snapper, you don't want anybody to know who you are. This podcast, that when you post it, I think 25 million Hawkeye fans are going to be like, Bill Reardon, who the hell's that? And that probably means I've had some success.
Blowing up. He's gonna blow up.
Another funny thing about that Ohio State game, when I snapped it over your head, we were on national TV. She was at a bar in Chicago and said, everybody, shut up. This is my brother. He's snapping the ball for the punter. And that was the one. I was like, did this really get any worse?
Oh,
I think she jinxed me on that one. I do remember our senior year, starting at center, I didn't want to do it anymore because he'd punt the ball so far. Oh, God, now I got to race all the way down. But at the end of the year, Coach Hendrickson gave me the special teams player of the year, which was laughable. With you two and Tim Dwight on our team, and for a made field goal, he was giving you like 5 points, but for a good snap, he was giving me like 3.
Lifetime Achievement Award, maybe.
Yeah, the point system was a little off. I think the biggest trivia question in 1996, who was a special teams player that shared the honors with Tim Dwight and Bill Reardon? They'd be like, who? I'm like, exactly. Liam.
Yeah, we know him. Okay. You were able to practice fully on the sidelines, which probably helps. Punting and kicking, you got a net, you can't see the outcome. But could you tell the one that didn't go well? Were you like, oh man, that felt weird?
I released it. I didn't follow through with it. I think I was probably so worried about having Vrabel and those guys that are up there. Those guys all had great NFL careers. That team was scary. It was, you're just in a horseshoe. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Snap the ball first, then block. Times at center, but I have to block back on a nose guard. I'm just trying to get there quick enough so the guard can get out. And I would mess up the under center snap. It was just one of those things where you didn't do your job because you were trying to do something else. And the bottom line is, if you don't do the first thing, there's no point in doing anything else. The whole play is in jeopardy. Those are some of the things I passed along to my son. I'm always like, don't worry about the block until after that ball has left your hands. You got to snap the ball first. That's the only reason why you're out there.
Yeah.
So,
bring it up. I know you've been beating yourself up for 30 years, like the rest of us. Yeah, I'm more just curious of the mindset. We played so closely together. What was it like back then for you? And so the short snaps, did they have the rule that they couldn't pile on top of you or jump over top of you?
no, I don't think they had that rule till later. On the punt snaps, it didn't matter. They could line up. They could do whatever they wanted to on the punt snap. So we went into a pro style our junior and senior year. I was backing up after I snapped it and blocking in one of the gaps. For field goals and PATs, they couldn't line right up over. They were afraid of you hurting your neck. That was the reason. But I was on my back maybe 2 or 3 times a game. They would just bowl us over. You're totally vulnerable. But one thing that was interesting was Jefferson Bates was the holder for my sophomore year. The 3rd game of the season, he says, I don't think you realize this. Every time you snap the ball, I have to turn it 180 degrees. Every time. The laces were right where you were kicking it. Is there any way you could just turn the ball 180 degrees in your hands and snap it? But we did it on a Thursday, and then it was laces out every time. JB just got tired of spinning the ball. He got mad at me. Anything to make the holder's job easier. But the short snap's a little different. That's more all upper body with the field goals and PATs, but the punch, you really got to use your whole body because you got to get it back 15 yards. You really have to use your legs, hips, and lats. It's like pitching out of the wind-up rather than just out of a stretch.
Probably different stance to some degree too, right? You're like field goal stance,
Yeah.
feels squattier.
I can't remember who figured out about my long snap. Could have been you, Nick. I know you liked it on your right hip. A lot of times it was coming in on your left hip. One of you guys was like, why don't you just cock a little to the side? Put your right foot up and drop your left foot a little bit. Don't put your feet symmetric. Just drop one. It was like a golf swing. Just little tweaks, open your stance or hold the club differently. Seems to be the way it is. I don't know if you guys had things like that with your kicking, just little tweaks that you make.
A good analogy for kicking is definitely the golf swing. I even was recommended to read some golf books to see how the mechanics are similar, right? You're tweaking things as little as I'm going to move an inch to the left, a little inch to the right, a half a step back, a little bit forward, see if that changes things. It does. It's little slight things like that. You're trying to figure out what can I do consistently that actually gets the best results. I feel like it's constantly tweaking. That's not quite right. It's not quite right. It's a little off still.
Early this question, when you hit a good field goal or PAT, it's almost like a chip shot. They always say that. They say, oh, it's a chip shot. Are you actually hitting down on the ball or are you hitting up on it?
Hitting up on it. It's like a tee shot. Yeah.
It's like a driver.
The kickoff's more like the driver. My nickname that Paul Longo gave me was One Iron because he thought that's what I look like. That's the type of golf shot he would use if we needed a long field goal. I want to pull out my 1 iron out of the golf bag. We're 200 yards out and I need to hit it really long distance. So you're swinging it, trying to hit it right at the very bottom so that your leg's coming up as you make contact.
Paul was very good with the special team stuff, even though he was a strength coach. He held a long snapping a lot.
He was like a kick returner or something.
He sent me a text message about a year ago, and it was the Kelce brothers. Jason was a fullback. Paul did not have to do this. I had his cell number because when he was the strength coach at Notre Dame, we would text each other. I'd be on campus, and he would invite me and the family to come into the weight room. Great guy. It was great catching up with him. Jason Kelce was a fullback at Cincinnati. It was Paul's decision to move him to center. And he didn't want to do it. I think a lot of the coaches thought he was crazy because he was undersized. He's listen, I coached a kid at Iowa that was undersized. You could totally play this position if you have big enough guards. So it was funny. He sent me a text. The Kelce brothers were talking about how Paul did that. I put him at center. He was about as small as you were. He could probably do it. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, he sent me that. It was in one of their podcasts they did like a year ago. And he was on that staff with Brian Kelly at one of the Michigan MAC schools. Then they went to Cincinnati. Then they went to Notre Dame. Paul was also the reason Travis Kelce got a scholarship. Jason was an offensive lineman, and Travis had no scholarships anywhere, any other D1 school. Paul, I guess, went into Brian Kelly's office. This is according to the Kelce brothers. He said, you better grab this kid now. He's going to be a big-time player. Paul, it was great. You know, when he said things, they made a lot of sense. He just injected little words of wisdom. But he was great. Another great guy that just contributed to our success. I thought he was a great strength coach.
I think he used to yell at us because we were trying to get hyped up to lift. I got confused by that because I was like, should we like be slamming music? You guys be quiet and calm down out there. I was like, am I in the wrong spot?
I thought we only had 2 options in the weight room. Bob Seger CD, and there was like one other CD like Metallica. That was our 2 choices. I get these flashbacks when I hear Bob Seger. Oh gosh, is it time to lift weights in the weight room now?
Yeah.
Whenever we moved into that new locker room, they had a sound system. It was like 2 CDs. It just takes me back every time.
They bring the Jerky Boys in.
Yes.
We listen before practice. The calls.
I forgot about that.
That was pretty solid.
Where would you listen that to? Was that in the weight room? Or
we listened in the
locker room. Okay.
Everybody would be feeling sorry for themselves. It would be 99 degrees outside and 99% humidity. And everybody would just be like, oh, I don't want to go to practice. It's going to be so hot. And we'd sit in the air conditioning, listen to the Jerky Boys. The very last minute, we had to go out to practice.
Was that about the time with Adam Sandler and the Talking Goat?
Yeah, Adam Sandler. Remember Coach Fry was always big on keeping the offense and defense separate. He was really into that. We always had different locker rooms. We rode on different buses.
That's right.
It's interesting. We see all the little tweaks that he had. The 7-step drop. Sherman saying that he had to drop backwards so he could see everything.
He would run with his shoulders square to the line of scrimmage.
The stand-up tight end, the pooch kicking thing, the kickoff deal. There was a lot of those little pieces.
He always worked in an exotic play on the offense, whether it was a reverse or something silly. His philosophy always was, now the opposing team is going to have to spend a half an hour working on this. They could have been doing something else, preparing for the game. Sometimes those exotics would work. Shermy scored a touchdown, I think, on one of them. Minnesota, maybe. Did White throw it to him?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. He's got that picture in his garage. He said, I'm in the background of it. It's like couple
Oh,
inches
does he?
down, like,
Yeah, awesome.
I want to see that.
Did we ever have a fake punt where you would throw or run the ball? They should have done more of those. You love running people over.
We threw one to Tim Dwight. By the time I got it out of my hand, he was already 40 yards down the field and had to come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
It was a penalty or something too. So it was end of the half. Yeah, it was a dud. I remember playing in one of the spring games. I caught a couple of passes as a tight end.
Did you ever keep the football from your touchdown at Illinois?
I didn't. I should have. I didn't want to drop it, so I literally was just like this really weird, awkward catch, close like it was a newborn baby kind of thing. So yeah, that wasn't cool to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Then once we got back into the locker room, I was feeling hyped up. Coach Fry says, "We're so terrible that our punter has to score for us." I came back to earth and was like, "Yeah, that's pretty bad."
Yeah.
I think that took the air out of it quickly.
Coach Fry had that one saying. He always said, "You guys ever hear the one about when the Minnesota fan comes to the game in Iowa?" He said he brings a pair of underwear and a $20 bill. When he goes back to Minnesota, he didn't change either one of them.
Yeah.
He had all those corny jokes.
He said that about the Iowa fans going to bowl games too.
They haven't changed either one by the time they get home.
I wish we had recordings of all of his speeches. We only
Do you
get the
remember
bits and
the one-
pieces that stick, but I know there's so many gems.
Do you guys
and-
remember the marijuana talk? When he got so pissed, I'm sick and tired of everybody testing positive for marijuana, going off on everybody.
I don't remember that one.
Oh,
man.
he went off on everybody. And they started laughing.
What year was that?
I can't remember, but classic.
Yeah, he had some classic one-liners. I didn't know what he was talking about.
Another cool moment was when he won his 200th game. They got him a trophy, and they presented it in the locker room. I can't remember who he beat.
Minnesota.
He beat Minnesota for his 200th, and Matt Purdy and somebody else carried him off the field.
Parker.
And Parker. Yeah, that's a great picture of those two carrying him off the field. We got him in the locker room, presented him with a trophy, and he got pretty emotional. That was a moment. I remember he would get emotional once in a while.
I didn't realize the Sun Bowl, how important that was for him because of where he grew up. That was as close as we got to playing where he grew up. I think that was like a coming home party, and then to beat a team he'd lost to in the Rose Bowl. At the time, we didn't realize it till afterwards. He was just so elated. There are special moments like that where he's jacked up after the win, and it's one of those special games
that
for
was
him.
a great bowl trip. Remember when we hit El Paso, they gave us our per diem, and he was like, "I don't want to see you guys for 3 days." And we just went bananas. We went over to Juarez. I think my $100 was gone after night one, after like 3 nights of going nuts. We went to work. I remember on Christmas Day, the coaches were all pissed off at us, and we had to run 1,000,000 crossfields. They would not end practice. They were like, "Not good enough." It was Christmas Day. Everybody was so pissed. It's those little things you remember.
I think we had gone out pretty big the one night. We thought we were the only people in the hotel. Yeah, we all went to the hot tub. We weren't really that crazy, just loud because I think we were all drunk. We were all in there.
No, it was loud. And then Bobby Diaco was out there with his wife in the hot tub. He was the one making drinks. Somebody was out there making drinks. Coach Fry goes out there, and anybody associated with Iowa football, get back to your room. Everybody took off running, chucking beer bottles into the pool and the hot tub. They didn't want Coach Fry to see him drinking, so everybody just started firing. That morning, I remember we cut through the pool, and there was like a case of beers in the bottom of the pool and glasses in the hot tub. And I was asking Coach Verducci about that. I'm like, what the hell happened? Why was Coach Fry the one who got called at 3 a.m. to kick everybody out of the pool? He said it was like the hotel manager had no idea. They thought, "Oh, this is the head guy to call. I gotta call him." The manager called Coach Fry and woke him out of bed. He didn't delegate it either. He just took care of it.
I think Trooper Stewart stumbled over the fence, so they probably were having a good time themselves, I would assume.
Yeah.
I say that out loud. And of course, Chris Knipper and maybe someone else and I were, there's no one going to be in the hot tub now, so we went back out. We got in trouble. Some of you assholes went back. I was like,
Yeah. That was a fun trip.
I was old enough that I wasn't deathly afraid of getting in trouble at that point.
That Washington team was really good.
Was there a rap battle?
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
talent competition. The guy who was hosting it, he said, the last 5 people who've won this talent contest have won the game. And a couple guys put together a rap that was really good. Washington didn't have anything to counter it. It was like an Eminem type situation. We went out there and beat them.
Those bowl games were crazy. Like the whole process of it. Go down there for a couple of days and back into football gear after being out for 3 weeks, whatever. All kind of the hype and whatever around it. I guess we didn't play huge bowls.
Remember the inaugural Alamo Bowl our freshman year? They put us in 2-a-days again. It was miserable. We were in Iowa City all of December after finals. Then we went out there, got our butts kicked by California. It was a miserable experience. Except Brian's field goal.
The lone bright spot.
Yeah.
I think that was the closest we got anywhere near their end zone.
Paul Burmeister, I remember he was friends with my brother. My brother was a year ahead of me at Iowa. Tommy calls me, hey, come up here. I'm in Burmeister's room after the game. I went up there. Burmeister was just laying on the bed and he had ice packs over his entire body. He was furious. That was his last college football game ever. He was like a walking ice bag.
He got beat up pretty good that game. Yeah, that was a big mismatch.
Right.
We shouldn't have been playing them.
They were good. They should have been on the Rose Bowl that year, people were saying.
They had some bad injuries, and then those guys came back, and they were unstoppable.
Was Pat Barnes on that team?
Dave Barr. They beat us, and then he started dating one of our cheerleaders or something like that. I'll have to look that up. The quarterback and someone from Iowa.
Wasn't somebody hanging out with Coach Fry's daughter? Was it an Iowa coach's daughter or a cheerleader? I can't remember. Somebody's sister.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that the trip that the band got kicked out of the hotel?
Oh, I don't remember that.
But I think the band got so rowdy at one of those bowl games, they sent them all home. They were out of control. Hearing some of those stories, wow.
I never thought about some of this stuff for 30 years.
Some of those I hadn't heard of those stories too. We're learning things that never got shared, or we weren't in the right friend circles to hear them all. So that's cool.
You guys ever go to the Iowa Football Club tailgaters? That was a great thing that got started about 15 years ago. We got to know a lot of the guys who played on that 85 Rose Bowl team. Those guys were a lot of fun. It's funny, different names, different time, same stories, the craziness that would go on.
Who did you room with, like in Slater and later?
In Slater freshman year, I roomed with Rashawn Miller. He was a walk-on offensive lineman who had a heart murmur. He had some issue with his heart. Ian Davis and I were roommates sophomore year. God rest his soul. Ian was a character.
He was.
All 6'7" of them.
Giant.
He was a house of a man, wasn't he?
I think he was like one of the number 1 recruited offensive linemen in the country from Pekin, Illinois. Ian was a lot of fun. He showed up to 2-a-days and he looked like that villain from Batman, Two-Face. He had like stitches and scars just on his face and neck. I was like, what the hell happened to you? I was on a skateboard riding down the street. I lost my balance, put my head through a windshield. All 330 pounds went flying through a windshield.
Well, he almost died.
He almost died.
Like it almost cut his neck, his jugular or something. Barely missed it.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Remember we had to stay in Slater. We were the first class that only had to do 2 years in Slater, maybe. Everybody had to do 3 before us.
That was the biggest miss for them. They're like, we don't want you guys living off campus so we can keep track of you. I was like, you're putting 40 of us animals together and nothing to do. Are you guys insane?
Speaking to the older guys, the Rose Bowl guys from 85, they said they had to live in the dorm for 5 years. I was like, wow.
I vaguely remember some old stories. He'd get a pellet gun and he'd just start going around trying to shoot us with it.
That was Mike Yaculo, the guy that went to my high school. That was the motivation for me to go to Iowa for my high school. And his nickname was Yagi. Mike was nuts. He was absolutely nuts. And he had a BB gun. They lived in Hillcrest.
Okay, so it was that story. Yeah.
And he would shoot students like walking across the bridge with a BB gun. Oh, man. Yeah. Those guys were certifiable. They were nuts.
The 84 team.
Yeah. It was Pat Peterson was the captain.
Yeah.
That would have been the 86 Rose Bowl, 85 team.
Yeah.
Chuck Long was a quarterback. I think you already said Houghton was the kicker, right?
Rob Outland, Hap Peterson. Trying to think of other guys. Bill Happel, does he show up?
Yeah, Billy Apple shows up.
Yep. Sure. There's any other good stories you can think of?
No, we got to make more. We got to make this happen for our 30th. Let's do it. We'll pick a Hawkeye Legacy weekend. We'll get Cedric into the Hall of Fame and storm the field. The 9-3
Alamo Bowl champ
with that one loss to Tulsa. It just kills you.
That steak is still sitting in my stomach.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Chicken or steak?
We flew in the same day we played.
They talked about that in the post-game interview. They said that was disrespectful.
We did that once before. That was not the first time we'd ever done that. The year before, our junior year, we went to Minnesota. We slept in Coralville or Cedar Rapids. It was only an hour flight. We laid around in a hotel and then went. It was a night game at the Metrodome, and Coach Fry didn't like us laying around all day. We tried that to keep us a little more focused. Didn't work against Tulsa. And why are we ever playing there?
We played them in 93.
Yeah.
But to do a home and away with them, that's unusual.
He didn't like Slutzker catch a 2-point conversion to win the game.
Yeah, that was really close. We almost lost. But we shouldn't have been surprised. But I don't think they were doing that well at the time, a couple games in. And then the next week they beat Oklahoma and then fell apart and had a losing season. They had wins against Iowa and Oklahoma that year.
Tulsa felt like we just couldn't get anything together. We just were so close so many times, and you're just like, why is this not working? The one in Iowa City was super close.
Yeah.
Minute left in the game, he caught that pass. The place went nuts.
And they had Gus Farad, who ended up playing in the NFL too. They had some good talent, and we weren't that great 93 either.
Didn't we play UNI a couple of years in there?
95, we played them.
That was probably a bad idea that we played them. Do you guys remember that game where, remember the locker room sucked? It was like a high school locker room at Iowa State. We all warm up, come in. Coach Fry gives his speech. Let's go, man. We're coming out. Coach Fry turns around. He said, everybody get back in the locker room. And he pushed everybody back in the locker room. He said, you're not going to believe this, but the Iowa State guys changed their uniforms. They went from like the mustard colored pants and like the red jersey, because it was Dan McCartney's first year. He did what Coach Fry did, changed everything, like the uniform. We destroyed them in the first half. Then we almost lost it. They clawed back. They got an onside kick at the end. I thought we were going to lose that game. It was 95. Yep. I think we beat up on them in that one. But there was one in 93. I remember it was Paul Burmeister was a quarterback. We killed them, and then they fought all the way back.
93 was 31-28 up there. That was the game that was windy. But I don't know if they had
the uniform
jerseys until 95.
You're right. It was Dan McCartney's first year. Yeah.
It was before McCartney then. Oh, yeah.
Jim Walden.
That was the one that Bielma said, it's been a pleasure kicking your ass for 5 years. Coach Fry was like, I agree with Brian. Shouldn't have said it, but I agree with him.
The guy did run his mouth a lot. He is always trash talking, so he deserved it.
I remember McCartney being disrespectful that year. Or maybe that was just the newspaper and the media trying to start something. I don't know. I heard that Coach Fry, when he took the job at Iowa, he kept one guy from the original staff, Dan McCartney. And Dan
I think Bernie Wyatt, the recruiting coordinator.
They were GAs or young coaches, and he kept them.
What year was that? Hayden's last year, McCartney beat him.
Yeah.
I think that might have been one of the first time his assistants beat him, because he had a good record against his former assistants. I think Alvarez got him that year too, I think. So
did he? Yeah.
And things are starting to fall apart.
We always had Wisconsin's number. I remember that.
We skipped them the 2 Rose Bowl years they had.
We got lucky on that one. Who was the tight end from City High that played at Wisconsin? He went in the NFL.
Michael Roan.
Mike Roan. He was a hell of a player.
He was recruited by Iowa. Then Alvarez left. Bernie Wyatt maybe joined Alvarez and left Iowa, but had the connection with Michael Roan at City High, and said, we're trying to build something at Wisconsin. Come join us. There was an Iowa connection, but he had to end with Wisconsin, because that was about the time when they were there. That's a unbelievable job turning that program around. They were pretty bad. They're almost like Northwestern bad.
Brett slid in there and was pretty successful. Brett went to Arkansas and they had to bring Barry Alvarez out of retirement to coach in the Rose Bowl. We watch these NFL games, like a team will be losing by 20 points and some guy gets a sack and he's dancing, doing backflips. Is that what you're supposed to do? Listen, just an angry old man.
We deserve it. We've earned it.
Carlos James, he got an interception, took his helmet off. Coach Fry got super pissed. He said, Carlos, next time you drop a ball, take your helmet off too. Yeah, or you missed a tackle, I want you to take your helmet off. Show everybody that you're the guy that missed the tackle.
That's hilarious.
I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Great catching up.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Bill.
sir. Yeah,
I'm glad we got the Willie guy Fruity Pebble story out there.
that's great.
He can just ask
Yeah,
for any
yeah.
kind of cereal, and they made
Yeah.
it happen.
All right, guys.
Love you.
I
See
love
ya.
you, Billy.
Thank
you.
Thanks
Take care,
for letting
man.
me be part of this. I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.